Good afternoon. Today is October 19th, 2025, and it's 1:11 p.m. U.S. Central Time. My name is Rinaldo J. Aguiar Marcano, and I'm recording this video from my home located at the 26714 Valleyside Drive, Katy, Texas, 77494. So let me just adjust this a little bit. Just 1 second. Okay. Okay. Yes. Hello. Yes. So this session, I'm going to make it a little bit short. The idea, this is not really a demo. It's more a way for me to send information out to ask a very specific question that I don't want to ask in writing because, there's high risk of interception, right? And for something else I saw that let me see that there is some risk. Okay. Well, let me start by saying what is that I saw, right? It occurred to me yesterday that the following question, right? I mean, the Venezuelan informant has done a very good job so far at putting me on alert before things like what happened on Friday happen. Like when they were trying to tamper with the food and all those things, like the informant told me beforehand, and that's why I didn't eat the food, right? And probably that's why I'm still here. But it occurred to me yesterday the following question: why is that he didn't tell me that they were going to try to lock me out of the car at Lake Point Estates? Right? I haven't talked to him, right, about this, because I don't want to mention any keywords, because I know they're going to be looking for keywords like they call mobile and suburban, lockout, things like that, right? So I'm not going to fall into that trap. But the question crossed my mind, right? And I think, I mean, this is a theory. I don't know because I cannot see what they're doing. But I imagine that the reason is that they did not use the Venezuelan team for that, right? That came from the FSB team, right? From Phil Denning's team. It might be a way to try to isolate the problem, right? Like if they know the Venezuelan team is heavily compromised, they can't trust them for do something like what they were going to do with the cold mobile, right? So they use the FSB, right? That's the theory, or the Chinese intelligence, right? But I think it was the FSB because of the location, Robert Mueller, Phil Denning, the Sachs, right? It was in that corner, right? None of those people are Chinese, right? If they were going to do it with the Chinese team, they would have done it in front of the house, right? Of the two safe Chinese houses that they have next to my house. Because I think for these kind of things, right? Like and this, I'm saying based on, experience being on the receiving end of this for 20 years, right? My experience tells me that when it's a physical operation like that, the control of the physical area is important. Who controls the physical area, right? That's why they pick the Lake Point Estates, because it's a gated community, fully under their control, right? Nobody gets into that community without them knowing. They could have done the same at a parking lot, right? It's also a private property, right? If they had locked me out in the parking lot of Walmart, it would be the same situation. They could have the car impounded, but it's an area that is not controlled. So who controls the area is important, and that goes beyond the Lake Point Estates. Like that goes to the street level, right? Like where the car is immobilized is important, and who controls that area. And they choose to do it on North Point Place. And none of those owners are Chinese, right? Like if you look at the owners in the property records, and I know because I have all of them in the pipeline, right? All of them. So you have Robert Mueller, right? Well, he's American, but he's playing for the other team, right? And all the other ones, there's one that has a last name Fetkovich, right? Who the pipeline tagged him and tied him to Liana Technologies, right? And Mark Swisher lives in that street, right? And there's a couple of people that are from the Emirates, right? From the United Emirates. So, no Chinese, right? And in that group of people, there are no Chinese owners. And they mobilize the car in that street. So I think operationally, right, the ones that were doing that was the FSB team. And so Michael Pretty's team, that's the same team, right? And remember, the one that stole the frequency of the remote was, well, I didn't see his face that time, right? But this is in the book. I even wrote it in the book. When they stole the YubiKey by opening the vehicle with the remote control, the day before, the dark SUV that Michael Pretty has sometimes parked outside, after he installed the cameras outside, now he started parking the SUV outside of the drive, like in his driveway, right? To block the camera, so the camera cannot see the corner. It's silly, right? Like they think that's the only camera I have. But anyhow, the day that they stole the YubiKey, the day before, Michael Pretty, well, or somebody driving exactly the same vehicle, right? The vehicle that looked exactly the same with the same plates, BTY something. It's in the book. Somebody was parking the driveway, right? And that person was waiting for me to come out and press the button of the remote control. Like the person was. It was obvious to me, right? Because when I came out, the person started moving the vehicle at constant speed, and I didn't press the button, right? But the person was waiting. Like it was obvious to me that the person was waiting for me to press the button before really leaving the street, right? Like he wanted to catch the signal of the remote. And the next day, they broke into the vehicle, right? So I think he succeeded at capturing the frequency, right? And that vehicle was parked in Michael Pretty's house the day before they broke into the car and stole the YubiKey, right? So and that was when the system, like the frequency analyzers that I have, picked up the messages from his house to my house that were co-clustered with Salvador Mendez, who apparently his real name is Andres Mendez. Maybe it's Andres Salvador Mendez or Salvador Andres Mendez. I don't know, right? But anyhow, it's the same thing, right? But what I was saying is that the area, even within Lake Point Estates, that they choose where to immobilize the vehicle was a choice, right? Like they trigger. I don't know how they did it, right? Maybe with an argon. I don't know how they really did the bump on the. I checked the videos and it's not visible, right? What really hit the SUV, but that was a choice. I mean, the place where they triggered it was a choice for two reasons. One, because they had to know when to hit, right, the SUV with whatever it is that they hit it. And secondly, because it had to be immobilized in a place that was within range to the device that they were going to use to lock the doors, right? I don't think it's a remote control. I think it's a directional device, right? Because it has to cover more distance, so they have to concentrate the signal. I don't think it's a radiant device. I think it's directional. Imagine like a radio frequency gun, right? So something like that. And they pointed at the vehicle from one of the houses. Now, another interesting thing is that they must have seen when I closed the door, right? Because they triggered the radio frequency, at the exact same moment, the second I closed the door. So that means that they must have been looking with a drone. There's one possibility, right? And the other one is that it had to be one of the houses that were on the left side of the vehicle. Because as I was traveling on that street, right, if it was one of the houses on the right, they wouldn't necessarily have visibility on when I was going to close the door, right? So the person that was watching when I closed the door must have been on one of the sides on the left side of the street, if I'm traveling on that direction, right? So I'm referring to the side of the street, sorry, where Robert Mueller lives, right? It must have been somebody from one of those houses that was watching when I closed the door. But yeah, but the important point, right? Why I'm making this video, asking this question publicly and not using my regular channels, is because that thought came into my mind, right? That they probably because the informant wasn't aware, right? He would have told me, I think, right? I mean, if there is such a risk that they could lock me out of the car and impound the vehicle, that would put in jeopardy everything he has been working for the last few months, right? I mean, his hopes at, whatever it is that he wants to do, right, after. So I think it would be in his best interest to tell me, but he didn't tell me. That means that the Venezuelan team was not informed, right? And that on itself is an interesting point. It means that what I'm doing is causing fracture in the structure of their organization, right? Like they are, how they play on the unity theme, right? Which is really compliance, right? They call it unity, but it really means submission. But they tell their people that they're united. But obviously now they're not behaving in that united way because they can't trust the Venezuelans, right? Because they don't know who is the informant. So anyhow, I realized the best way to do this, because I need to figure this out, right? Like, I have some information that came from the legal vaccine pipeline that seems that could be very impactful, right? But I need to run this through a lawyer, because that's the problem with, not the problem, but that's the thing with automated systems. Like, they don't have, as I said the other day, right? That they lack a moral fiber. They also lack, and I don't know how to call that, but so say I'm gonna try to describe what I mean, right? Because I don't know what this would be called in English, but imagine that you're a lawyer, right? Actually, this is a good example, right? When Morgan Heitner filed the original petition for divorce, and she served me with the papers, right, on October 16th, she served me with an order that now I understand that it was really a proposed order. It wasn't really an order, but she titled it order, right? She didn't put the proposed in brackets. So to make me think that it was an order, right? And the order was stripping me from all my parental rights, but it wasn't really an order. It was a proposed order. But she omitted the proposed to scare me, right? To harass me. But when I see the order, right? Oh, and I think she put a signature on it and everything. I don't know. But anyhow, she sent me a piece of paper, right? That was signed by a judge. It wasn't an order, it was something else. But I mean, she sent me the proposed order that was very aggressive, and she sent me another thing that was signed by a judge, a notice to appear. I don't know what it was, but it was signed by a judge, but it didn't have the name of the judge, right? So in my original response to their petition, I put a bullet point asking the judge to put their names on whatever they sign, right? And I mentioned the other day that, I mean, that sounds logical, right? Like, if a judge is, taking your son away from you, you want to know what's the name of that judge. It's not a crazy thing to say, right? Like, if you're gonna take my son, at least tell me your name, right? Like, don't put an illegible signature in a paper and take away my son. Like, tell me who you are, right? At least, so I know who I can hold accountable, right? Or try to hold accountable. But anyhow, I put that in the petition for divorce, and then Morgan Heitner took that and put her in her exhibits, calling into question my mental health, implying that a person that asks a judge that gives instructions to a judge is a crazy person. Right? That was one of her proofs that I'm crazy. But that is a good example, right? It's an example in which, if you look at it from a logical point of view, it makes sense, right? Like, I mean, somebody's going to take away your son, you want to know who that judge is. It's not a crazy thought. But if you're a lawyer and you see that, you think this person is crazy, right? Who is going to ask a judge and give instructions to a judge, right? Has to be a crazy person. Because what I'm trying to say is that in every societal system, there are unwritten rules that are not really laws, but are more like customs or mannerisms or manners, right? That are acceptable things to do, and are, that also dictate what things are unacceptable to do by moral rules of the collective behavior of the society or of that societal system, but are not written anywhere in a law, right? So the legal vaccine also lacks this capability, right? The legal vaccine doesn't know what are the the acceptable things to do, right? And there might be things that, from a logical and strictly legal point of view, might make perfect sense, but maybe, right, in this professional circle, it might be, frowned upon in a way, right? So I need to get an expert opinion, like from a human being that knows this professional circle and, gives me an opinion on whether this would be an appropriate step, right, or not. Because it seems to me like I see the debug output, and it seems to me like a powerful connection, right? Like it could be a powerful move, but I don't want to, do something that would derail, my efforts, right? So anyhow, that's the reason why I'm making this video, because I need to run this by a lawyer, and I'm hoping that the Venezuelan informant will help me. And at the same time, I don't want to use my regular channels because I know that they are trying to find the Venezuelan informant. So the best way is to make the request publicly and then get the response through the regular channels, right? It's basically implementing a two-channel communication when, so there is no shared encryption or common point of failure that they can exploit, right? So yes. So before I introduce you to the question, right? So now I'm going to talk to the Venezuelan informant, and this may not make much sense to maybe anybody else, right? So I apologize for that. And if at some point it's needed, I'll explain, what all this means. It's not that it's complicated, but you would need a lot of context to understand context about the case, right? To understand what I'm saying. Also, I thought about making this in Spanish, right, to make communication easy, but I'm thinking that, the lawyer is probably English speaking, right? An English speaker, and I'm not going to not cause any confusion. I'm going to make this in English, okay? So guessing that you're going to pass it to an English speaking lawyer, right? Okay, so to introduce a question, I'm going to describe something that happened on the September 8th hearing. That is actually kind of comical. It was, when I say to you, you will see it's hilarious, right? I mean, you can't make this up, right? And it's on the record. Like, people can go and check, right? Those records are public records. So this was on the September 8th hearing, September 8th, 2025. And it's important to the question. I mean, it's going to give context to the question that I'm going to ask, right? And it's also comical, so I'm going to say it. So on the September 8th hearing, I was trying, and this is mentioned in one of the federal lawsuits, in the one about civil rights violation under the color of state law. And that is also important. So on that hearing, I was trying to introduce an exhibit, which was, in that case, Exhibit B, as in Bob, which showed clearly that the litigation was a bad faith litigation, right? Intended to coerce me. I mean, the request for a psychiatric evaluation. And the reason why this exhibit was important was it was a direct admission recorded in video from the petitioner saying that if I had agreed to the mediation, we had reached an agreement in mediation, sorry, not like agreed to mediation, if I had agreed in mediation, right? If we had reached an agreement in mediation, there wouldn't have been any need for me to undergo a psychiatric evaluation. She said that, right? And it's recorded in the video, and I was trying to get admitted the transcripts of that video. It's very relevant, right? I mean, for what they were discussing, right? And I say they because I couldn't even talk, right? They didn't let me talk. The only people that talked was Morgan Heidner and the judge. I couldn't even talk. So anyhow, I'm trying to get the transcript admitted as evidence, right? I offered it once, and Morgan Heidner objected on the basis of a bunch of baseless objections, right? Like it was not certified. It was certified. Like, she was making stuff up. Anyhow, the judge didn't admit it. Then I had a second shot at getting it admitted via cross-examination, right? When Morgan Heidner called into the stand the petitioner, I had a chance to cross-examine her. And I could ask questions that would lead to the mention of the transcript, and that would allow me to get it admitted that way, right? So it was a second option. So as I was trying to do that, right, Morgan Heibner objects. No, actually, the judge tells me, right? I think she didn't even object. The judge tells me straight up, right? He says, you have to lay the predicate to get this admitted, right? I mean, this is just ignorance, right? I didn't know even what lay the predicate meant. I haven't even heard that phrase in my life before. It was the first time in my life. So imagine the situation I was in, right? I was there trying to get this critical piece of evidence in, trusting the system, right? Trusting that the system would do the right thing and give me my son back. So what was on the stakes for me, was getting my son back. I'm trying to get this piece of evidence in, and the judge cites this procedural thing that I didn't even know what it was, called you have to lay the predicate. So, I didn't know what to do, and I had to respond to the judge, right? Either laying the predicate or saying, I don't know how to do it. So I said, Judge, I'm proselytic here. I have to apologize, but I'm ignorant of this topic. Could you give me a hint what this is, and I'll try to figure it out here on the fly? The judge said, no. Yeah, I cannot give you any legal advice. So I said, well, thank you, Your Honor. Shut up, and sat down, right? I couldn't get it in, the exhibit. So anyhow, that happens, right? A few minutes pass, and this is a comical part, right? A few minutes pass, and Morgan Heibner calls me to the stand. I go and sit on the stand, and then she starts, asking me about the exhibits. Right? She filed a bunch of exhibits, 40 exhibits or something like that, and they were, half of them more or less, were posts that I wrote on my website on spyhell.org, and she picked specific exhibits. Okay, exhibits that, without context, if you read them, you think this person is delusional, right? And if you read the thing, not having any context of who the criminal network is and what they do and what they've been doing for 20-something years, you would think this person is crazy, right? Or that this is science fiction, that this is some kind of movie script, right? And she starts asking me about the different posts, right? And making faces like, the spies are following you and things like that, right? But the interesting thing that happened, right? I'm sitting on the stand, right? I'm sitting on the stand, answering her questions, right? And she's trying to get one of those exhibits in, right? And she has to lay the predicate. But she forgets, and she starts, acting as if the exhibit is admitted. And the judge stops her and tells her, hey, Heibner, counsel, you have to lay the predicate, right? The exact same thing that he told me just 10 minutes before. Like it was a matter of minutes of difference, right? And Morgan Heibner messed it up. She didn't know how to lay the predicate. I mean, she is a licensed attorney since at least 2013, according to the bar, right? And she didn't know. Like she messed up the step. It's like it's a specific procedure, and it has like 4 steps, I believe, if I recall correctly. And she forgot 2 of the steps, right? She only did 2 things, and she forgot 2. And the judge stopped her on her tracks, and then he started reciting from the bench the 4 steps. And he told her, and this should be recording the cameras, remember, counsel, you have to do step A, and then he explained the step. I don't even recall what it is, right? Then you do have to do a step B, and you have to do this. And then you have to do a step C, and you have to do this. And then you have to do this, a step D, and then you have to do this. He recited, he coached her from the bench, right? On how to lay the predicate, the same thing that he refused to even give me a hint. I wasn't asking him for the procedure. I was asking him for a hint, right? Of course, I realized that if he had given me a hint, I would have never guessed this procedure. It's a very specific set of things, right? You have to show that the exhibit is relevant, that it's authentic, that it hasn't been tampered with. It's a series of things. But the comical part, right? And it's almost cinematic. The comical part is that when I see this, I mean, remember, I'm sitting on the stand. She's interrogating me as a witness, right? Discrediting me and calling me crazy and things like that. But I'm sitting on the stand, and when the judge starts reciting the It's just so funny to me. I mean, looking at it backwards, right, in perspective, it's funny. So when the judge starts reciting the 4 steps, I objected, but not to Morgan Heiner, to the judge. I mean, I'm sorry, it's just so funny because you would normally object, right, to the to what the opposing counsel is doing or saying, right? But in this scenario, I say object, right? And then the judge turns around and looks at me and and asked me, what is the basis for your objection? And I said, unfairness, right? This is unfair. But I wasn't really referring to what Morgan Heimler was saying. I was objecting to what the judge was doing. He was giving her the same advice that he denied to me 10 minutes ago. I mean, this is the definition of unfairness. Now, I have to tell you, if you ever find yourself in this position, when you object to something, there's a certain set of things or grounds that you can use to, you can object because of relevance, because it's leading to an answer. Like there's certain categories of objections, like these are legal concepts. Like you cannot object with things that you make up, right? Like that thing of unfairness is not one of the concepts or the grounds for objection, right? So when I said unfairness, the judge literally laughed. Like it was like, that's not a legal concept. And he continued with Morgan Heimler reciting the steps that she should execute to get her exhibit admitted, and it got admitted. Like she got the exhibit admitted to call me crazy, right? Using the advice of the judge given from the bench, right? I mean, what country is this, right? And like this is recorded in those audio recordings of the court. Like if anybody goes and check those recordings, like all this has to be there, right? So I don't know. It's one of those stories that it's just funny, right? Now this is important, right? Because this is what what brings me here today to send this question to potentially that lawyer, right? So the legal vaccine, if I I have been running it, right, for multiple iterations, and I set it to run I put a super high number. I think it was 98 iterations, right, when I usually use 13 to 20. And it's been running and running and running. And I think, if I can describe what I saw on iteration 98, it went nuclear, right? Like the pipeline has gone nuclear. And like as I said the other day, right, these kind of systems, they lack what normally would be regulatory systems that are embedded in the human mind, right? So this thing has no filter. It's aggressive, and it's it's focused on that goal, right, which is to win. So if I read the output, right, the pipeline is making a series of connections that I see them and I think they're aggressive, right? And I need to consult an experienced attorney on whether this could be a good path forward, right? Legally speaking, for my legal strategy. So the sequence of events that the pipeline is, or not events, but like they're events, like the sequence of observations that the pipeline is flagging and is connecting together into a cohesive legal strategy are the following. First, and this got in because I mentioned some of these things in demos recently, and I ingested those transcripts into the pipeline before running these 98 iterations. So the first thing in this chain is the mention of the RICO or RICO, I don't know how to pronounce it in English, the Racketeer and Influence Corrupt Organizations Act. I sent a RICO or RICO notice to Morgan Heimler back on July, imagine that, before the temporary orders drama and all that. Because I already knew, right, that she was part of the network. And in the RICO notice, in fact, the RICO notice is here. Let's have a look at that notice, because it's it's kind of the starting point of this. sorry. It's kind of the starting point of this, let's call it train of thought, right, of the pipeline. So it's important to understand what it really means. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, sorry, the video is getting a bit lagged. I think the computer is, not too good. Okay, but in this share folder that I put in the video, I'll put the link to this in the video. There's a bunch of, you have to, when you, the title or the name of the files might not be very descriptive. Like, you will see all of these that say untitled, but you can figure it out by the date. So these were on October 17th. So these are things that I talked about in the demo of October 17th. Okay. Yes. So here's the RICO notice that I sent to Morgan Heibner and to the two Adams lawyers, right? The owners of the founder and the son, who is now the principal of the Adams law firm. And I sent this, I think it was on July, and you can see even the barcode of the mailing. It was sent over registered mail. I think it was July 29, but let me check the date. Just a sec. No, I made a mistake here. So. Okay. Okay. Yes. So here you can see, right? July 29. And here in this notice, I gave her notice that that I was being targeted by a criminal enterprise, and I outlined specifically the things that at that point I knew that she was doing, right? Like prosecuting frivolous motions and attempting to censor me and violating the due process, right? So she was put on notice that she was helping this criminal enterprise since at least July 29, right? And this was sent over registered mail, so she knows, right? Legally speaking, she is aware, right? And she introduced, let me restore the video. Okay, so she's aware, right, since at least July 29, that she's helping Diosdado Cabello, right, and the criminal enterprise. And Diosdado Cabello is an individual wanted by the DOJ. There's a reward for him, right? So she's aware that she's helping, right? Now, the pipeline made a series of connections and derived a legal strategy based on that, okay? That I think, as I said, that the pipeline has gone nuclear, right, when doing this. So the other thing, the second connection, is that when Morgan Heibner got me on the stand at the court, at the trial, right, on September 8th, 2025, this episode that I described, right, where the judge told her how to lay predicate to get this evidence admitted, right? This evidence that I'm going to talk about. So during that hearing, she got admitted into the record, and she laid the proper predicate herself for a series of exhibits. Okay, and those exhibits she cherry-picked from my website. I'm talking about a set of about 12 exhibits specifically, right? These are the ones that the pipeline flagged. Okay, so these are exhibits of, basically they were posts from my website that she printed and converted, created exhibits with them. But I was the author. I wrote those pieces, right? Those are journal entries of an intelligence journal that I keep online, counterintelligence journal. And she picked a specific posts, okay? Now, the pipeline flags that there's more than 4,000 posts in total in the two websites that I run, right? And she picked these 12 specific pieces, okay? That's one data point. The other data point, I mean, she picked about 12 out of 4,000 posts, okay? So of a universe of 4,000 things that she could have picked, she picked these 12 specific things. Now, within that set of 12, they were posts about specific people, right? I'm going to mention the names of some of those people. One was Robert Mueller, the former FBI director. The other one, who lives at Lake Pond Estates, where they tried in the exact same street where they tried to lock me out of the Cold Mobile just on Friday, October 17th, 2025, 2 days ago, right? And lives or has that house 250 feet away from my house at Lake Pond Estates. So one was Robert Mueller. The other one was Phil Denning, right? The person that would have had the power to impound the vehicle on October 17th if I had been locked out of the vehicle, who also lives at Lake Pond Estates, right? The other person is Daniel King Everett, who lives in front of Robert Mueller at Lake Pond Estates and is suspected to be really Daniel Molero, right? An important SEBIN Venezuelan intelligence agent who's been targeting me for at least 10 years. And there's been multiple documented things, right? And another exhibit that she picked was one letter that I sent to the attorneys, the other attorneys that sued my company using, I mean, the one that sued my company was the Lake Point Estates Homeowners Association, right? Whose president is Phil Denning, right? They sued my company, and I think they got a default judgment for $3,000. I don't know, right? Using a specific law firm that had been harassing me for months, right? With the rules of Phil Denning and the Homeowners Association, and this is documented in the website. And I sent them a letter, a cease and desist letter, and also I sent them a letter claiming a POW status. Right? I sent that to that law firm, and that a specific letter is one of the exhibits that Morgan Heibner got into the record, right? Let me find real quickly here, because I didn't do this before, but I think I should do it. Yeah, sorry about that. It's gonna take me just a second to figure this out. Yeah, so the law firm is called Robert Markel Weinberg Butler Haley PC, and it's abbreviated as RMWBH. That's the acronym that they use for their. But the name of the law firm is Roberts, Markel, Weinberg, Butler, Haley, PC, and they have an office here in Houston, Texas. Okay, so that's the other entity that the pipeline, the legal vaccine pipeline specifically, is talking about in this series of events, because Morgan Heibner introduced that exhibit, right, in the September 8th proceeding. Okay, so she laid the proper predicate with help and coaching from the judge. She got that exhibit into the record that day, laying the proper predicate. Okay. The next point, so the pipeline connects all these entities directly to Morgan Heibner because she personally mentioned them in an official court proceeding and mentioned them in the specifically in the exhibits that she was using to call me crazy in court, right? So the pipeline derives that the set of people that would have benefited from the temporary orders calling me crazy and international abduction risk and all those things would be this set of people, logically, right? That she meant, like, she is portraying them as my victims, right? That's what she's doing. The victims of my craziness, right? That's what she was trying to do. And that's why she needed to get the order signed. That she's not going to get now, right? Because everything is stayed. So the pipeline connects all these entities, including Robert Mueller, to Morgan Heibner. The next point in the waterfall of chaos is that there is hard evidence about fraud against not one, but two Texas courts simultaneously by Morgan Heibner, because she signed that document titling it as notice of entry, temporary orders, when it really was a notice of hearing. And she did that to deceive the appellate court into dismissing or denying my petition for a writ of mandamus to get the order signed. She made them believe that the order was signed, and she knew that they were not signed. And she said that on the record on October 16th in that hearing, right? She said on the record that she knew that the orders were not signed. But yet she had created that document on October 10th, just 6 days before, saying in the title that the orders were signed. So she intentionally committed fraud against two, not one, but two different courts at the same time with a single document, right? And this is hard evidence that it's part of the record and is also in federal court. And was used to suppress my civil rights, right? And my constitutional rights to due process, for example, right? And familial affiliation. So, in short, the pipeline thinks that all these other people, Robert Mueller, Phil Denning, Daniel King Everett, and the other attorneys that she got into the record, right, in the September 8th hearing, that law firm that I just mentioned, that I should add all of them to the federal lawsuit for violation of civil rights under the color of a state law. And there was another incident, another 2 points that I forgot to mention, that in the middle is that Phil Denning filed in the past year, not one, but two allegedly false police reports to harass me with the police. And the police officer came to harass me at my home based on the false police reports that Phil Denning filed. One was, in one instance, that I wrote something with my truck, with my gardening truck, a small mini truck that I have to cut the grass. I wrote something in the lawn, right, in my own lawn, right? And Phil Denning called the police saying, or had somebody call the police, right, saying that I had written something in a neighbor's lawn, right? And the police came immediately, right? But that wasn't true. It was my own lawn. And the second instance was when he made a police report in combination with the security guard of Lake Point Estates, saying that I was impersonating a police officer because supposedly I had police lights in the SUV, in the Colmobile, which is not true. Those lights are not blue or red. They're white lights. They're not blue or red. And white lights are for civilian use. They're perfectly legal, right? But he made that false police report to send the police to my home to harass me. And a police officer came and asked me to show him the lights and everything, right? I had to open the vehicle and show him the lights. And nothing came, like he saw the lights, and I have this recorded in video, and he said, yes, these are civilian lights. There's nothing here that is illegal, right? So Phil Denning directly engaged the police to harass me, right? Which is exactly using, doing something unlawful under the color of a state law, right? And that would make Phil Denning be present not in one, but in two federal lawsuits, and that would connect the two lawsuits together, right? It would show, by connecting these two lawsuits, it would basically connect the dots for everybody, including the public, of how these state and commercial actors, let's call them, right? Like the Travis Kalanick's, the Elon Musk's, like these people, with the state actors, which are mentioned in one lawsuit, how they're using the color of law on the other lawsuit to target people, right? So that's what the pipeline thinks that should be the right move, right? Go nuclear. Add Robert Mueller, Phil Denning, the other lawyers, Daniel King Everett, into the the civil rights violation lawsuit. And speaking of officers, there's another thing I wanted to mention. Let me show you. Is that, and I mentioned this before, right? In one of the occasions that I was going to the federal court on, I think it was August 15, 2025, I think was the date. And I was going to file an important document. One police officer stopped me as I was going to the court, right? And he gave me a citation. Let me show you the citation, because it's important, right? Oh, and the pipeline also thinks I should add Officer Flores, who is the security guard that works on the state court, to that lawsuit, because he, in 2 occasions, has inspected my keys, looking for the UV keys, and immediately after, there has been a serious security incident targeting me. And the pipeline gives this data point super high importance in the chain of legal liability, because he is part of the police and he is also part of the state court system. He's the security guard at the state court that Morgan Heibner is using to kidnap my son, right? So he ties the two systems together, the police and the court, which is the basis for the Monell claim, right? Okay, so the citation, sorry, the citation should be this one. Okay. Yeah, so the citation, I put it here in the folder, right? And I'm showing this because there's two things that caught my attention. I haven't run it through the OCR pipeline, so I noticed this manually, right? But I'll say it. So, and here's the citation number: is Q1. Let me see. I think it's Q1. Yeah, Q1199 is the citation number. Now, there's 2 things that caught my attention. One, he didn't give me a ticket, right? For having, improper equipment or anything. He gave me a citation, which I don't really know what the citation. I mean, if it's not a ticket, if I don't owe anything, why he's giving me a citation, right? But I don't know. I have to run this through the legal pipeline to see. But the thing that caught my attention is that the officer name is never mentioned in this ticket. It's not like there's my name, my information, but my car, but his name is not there at all, right? And this happened on September 15, 2025 at 7:44 a.m., just as I was going to the court, right? So he stopped me on my way to the court. Right? If this was designed, he's interfering with my access to justice as well, right? In a different court, in the federal court. It's serious. And his name is not in the citation, right? He didn't put his name in there. And there was other things that were odd in that situation, and I described them before. Like he made a call, like he wanted to ask his supervisor whether the white lights were allowed, and he made a call on his cell phone while being outside of the patrol car. Why he didn't use the radio? That's why they have a radio system, right? Well, he didn't use the radio because he didn't want his conversation to be recorded by the system, right? That audits their conversations. So anyhow, he did not put his name on the citation, right? And maybe that's why it's not a ticket, but a citation. So his name doesn't have to be in. I don't know. Like, I don't know the rules of procedure, police procedure, right? Why he gave me a citation and not a ticket, right? Anyhow, I have to respond to this and I have to go to the court, I guess. But the other thing that is interesting is that look at the email that appears in this citation, right? It says JP1-1 criminal. So he's citing it to a criminal court because the lights are white, right? This could be a move to create a criminal docket, right? Even if it's a small one, but create something in the criminal court with my name to discredit me in the federal court, right? So anyhow, I will of course file a Freedom of Information Act request to find out who is the officer, and if he is marked in the index, I will add him to the one of the John Doe officers placeholders that I have in the federal lawsuit, because he's not only sabotaging my access to the federal court, delaying me, right, and stopping me without a valid reason. Because when he stopped me, he verbally said that he was stopping me because the lights are blue, and those are police lights, and that's not true. The lights are not blue, are white. So the reason for the stop was invalid to begin with, right? He shouldn't even have given me a citation. But I think it's a way to create something in a docket, at least, or like some entry in a criminal court that then Morgan Heibner or the other lawyers, right, the field denning lawyers that work with the HOA of Lake Point State, the Roberts, Markel, those lawyers can then go and dig that record and say, hey, this guy even has something in the criminal court, right? To discredit it, right? To then say no, Robert Mueller and Elon Musk and Phil Denning, and they're not. This is just a crazy guy that has, even criminal things in court, right? Like that he hasn't resolved. So it could be something like that. And of course, like the other thing is to plant something in the record that says that the lights might be perceived as police lights to justify that Phil Denning filed that police report, to say that it wasn't a false police report to harass me, that he genuinely thought these were police lights. Because if a police officer, even a police officer, thinks that this might look like police lights, then Phil Denning did nothing wrong. But the problem is, with all this, that is Morgan Heibner, right? That Morgan Heibner created that document that is hard evidence with her signature, with deliberate design to commit fraud, not against one, but two courts at the same time. And she also laid the proper predicate on September 8th with the help of the judge to introduce the name of Phil Denning and Robert Mueller and Daniel King Everett and the lawyers into the record. Right? So she herself is tying them all together to what she did. Because otherwise, why, among 4,000 or more journal entries written over 2 years, she picked these specific entries, naming these specific people and entities, right? Because she was trying to protect them, right? To discredit me, and in that way protect them from what they have been doing, right? Which would make them, I don't know what would be the word, right? I don't think it would be like accomplices to what she did. I think it would be even worse, right? Because the only people that would benefit from what she did were them. So they might be the designers of what she did, right? Not the accomplices, like the intellectual, how do you call that? The people that engineer what she's doing are them, right? Because they would benefit from this. Which I think would be, legally speaking, worse. Like there would be more liability in designing the crime than helping commit the crime, right? Or benefit indirectly from the crime. But so that's what the pipeline thinks, right? That I should do. So please send this information to the lawyer that you have, and let me know what if it's something that I should action, right? Or if I should leave the two things separate, right? Because that's the other play, right? Leave the two separate, and for now at least, right? And then watch and see what happens. Yes. So I have a bunch of other things to say, but I want to keep this isolated so I can act on it better, and then I'll do a different demo later to talk about the other things. Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time, and I'll see you in the next one.